Welcome back to another episode of the Experts in Fire podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vennard, and with me today is Randy Mowry. Today's episode is residential versus commercial fire pits. Let's get into it. Hey Randy, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today, sir?
I am awesome. We had an ice storm, and I happened to be on the road out in Southern California, so...
So you missed it all.
I missed the whole thing. Aw, shucks.
Man, yeah, you definitely missed it. I'm out walking the dog, and the power lines are not too far away, and it was just vibrating, those power lines. It looks like somebody dropped a stack of grand pianos on them. They were sitting so low. I'm like, yeah, it's time to turn around and go the other way.
Yeah, it was a good trip, though. You made it through the ice storm safely. It was...
Glad you guys had a good trip, and then glad somebody enjoyed some nice, fresh, clean, sunshiny air out there. That's nice.
So, Randy, we're talking about residential fire pits and commercial fire pits, and kind of what makes them different and, you know, what. So I figured we would start with, let's just talk about residential fire pits. That's a fire pit you could go anywhere and buy from your big box store to the Costco to Woodland Direct. And you can get what's considered a residential fire pit. What makes a fire pit residential?
Residential fire pits, yeah, it's like it's one of those things I had to sit there and think about it for a moment. But I guess when I think about, because you mentioned like Costco and different places that you can just go buy a fire pit. So residential fire pits for the most part, and again, I want to be careful on the styles and the way that they're made. So if we think about some of like the turnkey, we'll say fire pit tables that we offer, they could be just a simple match light or possibly just a simple sparker that allows you to turn the gas on and it has like a little sparker to ignite the main burner. And these could be fire bowls, Mike, fire pit tables, like I mentioned, square. You know, there's going to be some differences in like the materials that these are made out of. If it's a simple metal style table that's, and I don't want to use the word inexpensive, but just like a small turnkey type of thing, that might not be an application we're going to use in a commercial. It's just going to be strictly residential usage in it. And the ignition systems, the match light, those are the kind of drivers for residential fire pits. Just very simple types of products that can be used strictly in a residential application. Now, that's not to say that when we start to talk about commercial, those fire pits cannot be used in residential, because they can. But when we talk about residential, you can pretty much use anything in a residential application for a homeowner. Because with the homeowner, you're talking, it's homeowner responsibility. It is their fire pit. They're the ones using it, and they're taking on that responsibility of, if it's a match light, for example, a match light is just that. You're going to turn a little gas valve that's on the side of the fire pit, and you're going to use typically like one of those barbecue log lighter type things, and you're going to light the burner. That's the owner responsibility part of it, because if that flame goes out, they need to be able to recognize that flame is out, but it's still spewing gas out.
Yeah, that is 100% why Randy paused, and then we both laughed when I asked that question, because it's almost anything goes for residential, all the way up to timers and valves, stuff we're going to talk about on the commercial side here. But for residential, it's why Randy and I talk so much about safety in these shows, because the rules are so different. And when it comes to your home, you need to educate yourself and not just purchase. And this, I'm careful on this one, because we're all attempting to be frugal. Don't just purchase based on price when you're adding fire.
Right, you're adding fire. And then, you know, you mentioned like fire pits. The other side of that is also, we have a lot of folks that are getting their landscape professionals out there and building these backyard patios and actually site building the fire pit. And they're coming to us just for the burner components. And so there again, just the burner components where the flame's going to come out, there again with residential can be just that. It can be just a match light setup for that property. So they can build the structure however big, tall, whatever size they want, and then just come to Woodland for the parts and do a match light system, which is, and I say match light because it's the simplest way to create fire in that fire pit for them.
So on the residential side, it is, you know, if you can pick it up at the Home Depot, if you can pick it up at whatever big box store, places like that, you can put it in your backyard. Chances are there's going to be zero issue with it because it's, in essence, an addition that you're putting in. I do want to make sure we tell everyone, if you have a landscaper or hardscaper who's working in your yard and a fire feature is what you want in the yard, now your codes are going to step into place. So anytime you're adding that structure and gas lines are being run, things change. It's not the same as just buying something in a box at a store, or from online and bringing it to the house and setting it up and connecting it. You're now in the place where your hardscaper or landscaper should know if you're doing something in your own yard. If you're a hardscaper or landscaper, one of our pros listening out there, make sure you check on your local codes and the types of permits that are going to need to be pulled, and your gas pro, who you're going to use, your mechanical, all of that stuff. So there is a level of difference. Am I overcomplicating here, Randy?
No, because what you're talking about, you're going from a portable style unit that you can take from house to house as you move to a permanent structure on the property, typically. So when you start running gas lines, so there's definitely going to be some codes that have to be followed for that part of it, for the underground utilities or anything like that that's underground.
You have fire-related questions, and we have answers. You can email us your questions at podcast@woodlanddirect.com or give us a call at 586-221-3638. We would love to be able to answer them right here on the Experts in Fire podcast. Okay, so that's residential. What makes a fire pit go from residential to commercial?
So commercial, definitely a little bit different. First off, we're just going to say safety valve, some type of safety valve. And the safety valve is the element of the burner assembly that if that flame goes out, it's going to shut the gas supply off to that said burner on the fire pit. Now, when we talk about fire pits, like the chassis of the fire pit, whether it's a fire bowl, whether it's a custom table, those could be powder coated steel, they could be concrete, we call it glass fiber reinforced concrete, GFRC styles. So the chassis themselves can vary, but the safety part of it is going to be within the burner assemblies, Mike. Across the country, and this varies all over the place, it is going to require these types of safety valves inside for a commercial property. Now, have I been to locations that have had match light? Yes, and then I cringe and I go, how? First of all, just because there's no safety valve there. But, maybe they didn't know, or nobody did the research to check, or they didn't call Woodland Direct, so nobody explained it to them. And we understand that. We don't expect everybody to know. That's why we encourage everybody to call us.
So in those commercial environments, there are pieces to set up. And I hear you say valve, that safety valve is most important. How do we help people stay away from that big burst of flame as well?
So, for example, with commercial, there's a couple different options with the ignition systems. And, we do a lot of custom size fire pits for commercial properties. All of our controls are built into the stainless steel or brass, whatever the material is for the burner and the pan assemblies that are pre-built at the factories for us, okay? So that's where the electronics, and we're going to start there first. Ideally, across the country, we like to see in this and I can't stress it enough because it does vary, and I'm going to explain why here in a moment because I have a good example. You want to see like the either like a 110 volt to a 24 or 12 volt electronic ignition system. So this requires electricity, okay? So with electricity, then what this allows for, one, you can have all the safety features built into the ignition system. So with an electronic ignition system, if that same scenario, the flame blows out, that ignition system will attempt to relight itself possibly within 3 times, depending on the manufacturers. And if it fails to, it shuts that gas supply off. Now, as we move away from the fire pit, let's go upstream. How do we turn these fire pits on? Well, commercial property, typically there's going to be some type of timer or a light switch to be able to turn this fire pit on. Also in line with these electronics, there's an emergency stop, which is key for a lot of commercial properties. They have to have some type of emergency stop. It's a red style mushroom button that for whatever reason, something happens at the fire pit, somebody can go over there and hit that stop. It shuts the electronics off and shuts the valve on that burner valve and shuts the gas supply off right away. So you have the electronics with the safety valve built into it. We have our way of turning the fire pit on electronically. And, some hotels, restaurants, they may have even like different smart systems that allow them to do that with their smart system. But then the important part is the other part of that safety is that emergency stop allows them to shut that system off back at the valve.
Yeah, so usually that e-stop is in a place that's visible for everyone, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So a lot of times if you have your fire pit maybe said emergency stop is on a pole that's within 3 or 4 feet. I have restaurants that have the emergency stop where they're greeting customers as they come in. It's right there inside of the structure, but it's visible to the fire pit or fireplace, whatever they may have outside. So it can vary where it's going to be at, Mike, depending on the location.
And I always want to be careful here. If you're considering putting fire into a commercial environment, it is one of the coolest things. I mean, we went to multiple restaurants while we were out in Southern California, and just having that little touch of fire there, it's beautiful. So I don't want anyone to listen to this podcast and think, forget that, I'm going to steer away from fire. No. Just understand that there are safety precautions that are taken because it's fire. Learn them, know them, understand them for your local area, and it is one of the biggest attractors that we've discovered, Randy. We have a lot of clients, high-end clients, who they're trying to put fire everywhere because that's what their clients are asking for.
Oh, absolutely. We do tons of properties, whether it's hospitality, multifamily properties. I mean, you name it. We do a lot of it, which brings me to the next burner valve assembly. It's battery operated, but it has a flame sensing valve in it. So same thing. If that flame blows out, it will shut that gas supply off. It's battery operated. I always recommend that they make sure that they put them on a preventative maintenance schedule, meaning because it is battery and it's outside. So we all know what happens if you leave batteries in a flashlight and you leave it in your garage too long. It corrodes. It's just one of those things you have to be conscious of the batteries because it is battery operated.
You have added maintenance for sure to it, and it's a part of the calculation, right? If you're looking at a project to go, okay, do we want for the next 10 years to be changing batteries every 30 days or however long, to get to that place where it functions? I'm thinking of batteries and everything else I use. I was literally at a hotel the other night and I'm flipping through the channels. We got back early. I'm like, I'm going to turn on a basketball game or something while I'm sitting here working on my laptop, and the remote stopped working. It just stopped working. I couldn't flip anymore. And I'm thinking, dirty battery.
Yeah.
I thought about calling the front desk saying, hey, do you have batteries? I'll bring it down to you. And then I was like, screw it. I don't need TV anyway. I just turned it off. That's right. What makes me nervous about batteries. Oh, something's wrong with it. It doesn't work. We're not going to use the fire feature. You know what I mean? Because it's not working. Just change the battery, man.
Right. Yeah, so there's that option, and of course, I like to use that only as a last resort, of course, with battery operated in a commercial application. But I just want folks, contractors, builders to know that it is an option. It's not the ideal option because of what we just talked about. And also there is a timer with an emergency stop that we can use on that battery operated fire pit as well. So there's that part of the safety that we can use as well with the battery operated system. But there again, like I said, it's just not an ideal scenario. One of the things that you will find with a battery operated system, you're going to be limited on the size of your fire features as well versus having the full electronic ignition system. So you will be limited. So, it's not like somebody can call me and we can do 20-foot fire pit like we've done in the past and put a battery operated ignition system on it. It's just not something that's going to work properly.
What's exciting about it though, Randy, is there are areas where they need that ignition system. And almost every commercial property runs through a cycle of, hey, we're going to redo stuff every blank years, right? So it at least gives them the opportunity to say, during this cycle, we're going to put this safety feature in place. And then when we recycle through, we can run the electrical, or we can do what we need to do if we want to do it differently. So it's an excellent option. Good stuff, man. That's great.
Yeah, and just to touch on these commercial properties again, one of the things that companies may find across the country is, and this is comes a lot of times from the inspectors, Mike, where they're asking for UL listed burners. Is this product UL listed? And the UL has it's a certification that a product will perform as it's intended to perform, is what it is. And typically they're going to follow what is called the ANSI Z2197, so it's Outdoor Decorative Appliance Standards. Now, UL is kind of like I think you mentioned earlier. It's like the kind of like the Kleenex or the blanket that everybody understands and knows because it's in our gas stoves, it's in our refrigerators, the electronics. What I'd like to bring attention to for all of our professionals that are listening is when this comes up, all of our electronic ignition systems are going to be certified and they're going to follow the same ANSI Z7197 outdoor appliance, decorative outdoor appliance standards. However, they're going to use a different testing agency. So UL is a testing agency, but there's also Mike, there's Omni Test Laboratories, there is ETL, which is the old Edison testing laboratories. I think it's called Interlink now. And there's others that are out there. And that information, there's CSA, for our companies that, because we sell a lot in Canada. We have manufacturers in Canada. And that's, CSA is another one that is well known around the country. But I just wanted to bring that to attention to all of our inspectors that are listening and to all of our pros out there. If somebody's asking for UL, reach out to us, because what you'll find is when that comes to me, I can send all the documentation based on the product that they're looking for the electronic ignition systems. And it's following all the same guidelines. It's tested and we can use it, Mike.
That's the piece that we want to be very clear on. UL does not set standards. They are not the organization or the entity that is setting standards. They test to ANSI standards. So the standards are already set. All UL does is they come in and test to make sure that the product is living up to that standard. And what happened was they had a corner on the market. They were the only tester, so they became the Kleenex. Everybody looked for UL. They didn't understand that when they saw UL, that meant that whatever it was, refrigerator, motor, tested correctly, it tested up to standard by UL, but the standard is ANSI. So very careful if you don't understand that. And this is, I'll be honest, this is where a lot of people just go, oh, the rules say it has to be UL listed.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up. Just so, yeah, it's a great conversation. I mean, you could dig deep into all the different ANSI standards that are out there, but just letting folks understand that, like you said, Mike, they're just another testing agency.
Right. The proper way to say it would be it needs to be tested by a certified lab to ANSI blah, blah, blah standard. And that's where you have your labs that I think CSA is the biggest one we work with out here as well. A lot of people in our industry are moving towards CSA. But yeah, I agree, Randy. When it comes to that commercial listing, you'll have an inspector sometimes just go, nope, it's got to be UL listed. No, it needs to be listed to a ANSI standard, and it's been tested by this agency. I don't know what that agency is. We'll help you educate them on what that is. I made it sound like people are mean and rude all the time. They're not. They just don't know.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And that's, I have a couple properties down south that were using specific burners for years, and at that time they were all followed the UL standards, and then that company transitioned to CSA standards. It just confused them. They were like, "Whoa, wait a minute!" Once I provided them the information showing it still meets all the same ANSI standards, it's just they're using a different laboratory now. They were like, "Oh, okay, not a problem." It just confused them. It's just like you said. It's just they see UL for so long, and then when you start sending them something else, they just didn't understand it. Once they understood it, did follow all the same ANSI standards, everything made sense to them. And then kind of going with that is just I want to throw it into the residential real quick, so kind of got away from it. Everything we talked about in commercial with the safety valves, whether it be battery, whether it's electronic, these can all be used in a residential application as well. I just wanted to make our homeowners be aware of that, because I have a lot of projects that I do for residential that they have a smart home system, or they have multiple kids and teenagers in the house. And if they're away and they're using the fire pit, they want to make sure that it's safe. Everything we talked about for commercial can be used in residential. It's just everything in residential cannot be used in commercial.
Correct. And one of the things I wanted to point out on the listing side too was when it comes to that UL listing, typically your components are going to be listed. An entire unit can be listed all together. And then there are different rules. So if you're a hardscaper, landscaper pro out there, if you're a designer and somebody says, I want this custom, we have solutions for you there as well. Custom can't be listed until it's been built. So there are some ways that we work with different vendors out there who can build that for you and make sure it is tested in a manner that is going to be accepted by the inspectors in your area. So give us a call if you have something like that. If you're looking to do something custom, we do it all the time. There are options out there to make sure that we're all following the rules. And most important, again, the rules are there to help keep everybody safe. So that's what we want to do. Randy, do you have anything else when it comes to residential versus commercial?
No, not at this time. I think we've covered just about everything just to get that information out to folks and try not to confuse folks. And if we did, call us, we'll work it out and make sure that you understand as well.
Absolutely. And if you're out there listening and you have something else that you would love to hear us talk about, please send it on over. We'll talk about it. If you say, Mike and Randy, you guys are dumb, you didn't talk about this, or you messed this up, that's fine too. This is a conversation. It's not just us sitting here spewing information. So please get in touch with us. We'd love to talk with you about it. We'd love to bring more information because, like we said, our goal is to educate folks out there with the best information to help keep them safe, to help keep our pros moving forward, to help build that value between customer and professional. We here at Woodland Direct want to help you get there. So thank you everyone for listening. And Randy, as always, thanks for taking the time out and hanging out with us today, brother.
Absolutely. Flame on, everyone.
Flame on.
That's my new thing, flame on.
I love it. Join us next time for Can a Fire Pit Burn Both Gas and Wood? We'll see you then.